Welcome, dearly beloved anointed ones. Play with fire if you want, but don't act surprised when your secrets go up in smoke. Some people don't believe fat meat is greasy until the chosen one looks them in the eye and says nothing, and they feel exposed, convicted, and low-key ready to join a monastery. Let's talk about it. Because here's a strange but true fact. Scientists have studied the human gut and confirmed that intuition isn't just a feeling. It's a real biological signal that can detect lies, danger, and deception faster than logic can. But what happens when your gut feeling isn't just strong, it's spiritually weaponized? That's the problem they ran into. Someone in your life, maybe a friend, an ex, a co-worker, or even a family member, thought they could test you. They wanted to poke at your gifts, feed you fake stories, see if they could outsmart you, gaslight you a little, just to prove you're not as tapped in as you seem. But what happened next? You read their entire soul like an audiobook with receipts, timestamps, and background music. And ever since that moment, they've been freaked out, nervous, trying to act normal, but side-eyeing you like you're the FBI, the CIA, and their conscience wrapped in one. Today's video, we're diving deep into why they tried to test you, how you flipped it without even trying, and why your intuition isn't just a vibe. It's divine intelligence that sees what eyes can't and hears what mouths won't say. Stick around, because what you'll hear in the next few minutes will not only explain their nervous breakdown, it'll confirm that your gift is way more powerful than you thought and way more dangerous than they expected. Let's go. Number 1, they thought you were guessing. Now they're scared you're reading scripts from their soul. They thought you were just guessing, maybe being dramatic, maybe reading too much into things. But the moment you spoke something they never told a soul, something they thought was buried under layers of performance, charm, and strategy, that's when it hit them. You weren't playing around. You weren't throwing random darts in the dark. You were reading something invisible, and it scared them in a way they didn't expect. That smile you gave them wasn't a sign of naivety. It was spiritual surveillance wrapped in calm. And the very moment they realized you were onto them was the moment their whole game collapsed. This is the thing. Most people are used to getting away with things. They're used to being 3 steps ahead of others, manipulating conversations, twisting meanings, hiding intentions behind well-practiced expressions. But they've never dealt with someone who doesn't need to catch them in the act to know they're acting. You saw through them before they even opened their mouth. You didn't just read their body language, you read the language behind the body, the spirit, the vibe, the hidden agenda, and the worst part for them, you weren't even trying. That's what made it terrifying. Now they're uneasy around you, not because you threatened them or exposed them publicly, but because you could and you didn't. That type of spiritual maturity has them more nervous than an actual confrontation. You didn't use your knowing to shame them. You let it sit. You let them stew in the discomfort of being known too deeply by someone they can't control. And that alone has them freaked out. They keep testing you. Not because they don't believe you have the gift, but because they're trying to figure out how much you know. They're hoping it was just coincidence, just a lucky guess. But deep down, they know better. They feel it. You've pulled something sacred from the unseen, and now they're scrambling to look normal in front of someone who's already read their real face. The freak out isn't about fear of you. It's about fear of being found out by something they can't fake around. You didn't guess anything. You saw everything, and they know it. Number 2, you didn't just sense their motives, you exposed the motive behind the motive. Most people can sense when something feels off. You don't need to be spiritually gifted to notice a weird vibe or pick up on fake energy. But what shook them about you is that you didn't just catch the surface stuff. You went straight to the root. You didn't stop at what they did or said. You dug deeper, like you were spiritually wired to detect the real reason behind their moves. And when you spoke, you didn't just call out their behavior, you exposed the why behind it. That's what messed them up. They thought they were good at hiding it. They've gotten away with wearing masks for so long that they forgot they were even pretending. But your presence pulled something out of them they weren't ready to face. You weren't just reading their energy. You were peeling back layers they didn't give you permission to touch. And what really disturbed them is that you hit a nerve they've worked hard to keep buried. Maybe it was their jealousy, their insecurity, or their guilt. Maybe it was the fact that they wanted to see you fall and couldn't admit it out loud. Whatever it was, you didn't just sense it. You spoke it, and not in a confrontational way either. You just casually said something that landed too close to the truth, and suddenly they were triggered. It was the kind of truth that left no room for excuses, no room to hide. And it's not that you tried to expose them, it's just that your gift doesn't allow darkness to sit comfortably. You naturally reveal what people are trying to bury. And this person thought they were in control of the situation. They thought they were testing you, but the whole time they were the one being revealed. Now they're second-guessing everything, wondering how much more you see, questioning if every conversation with you is really just a soft interrogation from the divine. They're paranoid because you didn't just catch the bad behavior, you exposed the brokenness beneath it. You saw the motive that even they hadn't admitted to themselves yet. And once that light touched their shadow, they couldn't unsee it. You weren't trying to play detective, you were just being real. But that raw honesty, powered by divine insight, shook something they weren't ready to face. Number 3, you made their manipulation backfire without saying a word. They came with a plan. Maybe they smiled in your face, acted supportive, asked a few too many personal questions, or tried to bait you into reacting. But underneath it all, they had an agenda. They wanted to manipulate the moment, steer the conversation, maybe even catch you slipping so they could say, "See, they're not who they claim to be." But what they didn't expect was how effortlessly you flipped the whole situation without even raising your voice, without accusing anyone, and without exposing your hand. You stayed calm. You stayed grounded. And that's exactly what shook them. They were banking on you getting emotional, confused, or defensive. But you didn't give them anything to work with. You let them talk. You let them reveal more than they realized. You observed, not because you were unsure, but because you already knew. And the whole time your energy was doing the work your words didn't need to. That's what made their manipulation fall apart. It didn't bounce back and explode because of what you said. It crumbled under the weight of your stillness and spiritual clarity. See, when someone's trying to play games and the other person refuses to engage, the entire structure of the manipulation collapses. That's what happened here. You didn't feed their ego. You didn't take the bait. You didn't play defense. You just stood in your truth and let their lies twist around themselves. And that's the worst thing that can happen to someone trying to test a chosen one. They end up exposing their own hand while thinking they were 2 steps ahead. Now they're rattled. They don't know how to explain what just happened. All they know is that you didn't react the way they expected, and somehow they ended up looking like the one who was being shady. And deep down they know you saw through it all. They feel it. That's why they've been weird ever since. They're not afraid of confrontation. They're afraid of the fact that you outmaneuvered them spiritually without even lifting a finger. You didn't come to play chess or checkers. You came with discernment. And that's a game they weren't prepared to lose. The moment they tried to manipulate the narrative, they realized you were the mirror, and their own reflection betrayed them. Number 4. They didn't expect spiritual accuracy to feel like a personal audit. They thought this would be light, casual, maybe even funny, just testing you out to see if all that intuition stuff you speak about really holds weight. But when you opened your mouth and said something that touched a memory they buried years ago, when you referenced a decision they regret but never spoke out loud, that's when they stopped smiling. Because you didn't just respond to the moment. You accessed something timeless. You spoke like someone who had been walking through their history, flipping through the emotional paperwork of their life. They didn't expect spiritual accuracy to feel like a personal audit. But that's exactly what happened. Your words didn't just make sense. They struck a nerve. You mentioned patterns. You echoed thoughts they've only had in the dark. You connected dots they didn't think anyone else could see. And suddenly what they thought was a game felt like a divine interrogation, not in a harsh or judgmental way, but in a way that forced them to confront themselves without warning. That's why they looked uncomfortable. That's why they got quiet. You triggered a realization they weren't ready for. What freaked them out wasn't just that you knew something. It was the level of precision. You didn't just feel a vibe. You practically read the blueprint. You spoke into their wounds, their habits, their cycles. You gave language to things they couldn't explain about themselves. And the scariest part? You did it gently. You didn't accuse. You didn't pry. You just spoke truth. and it hit like lightning. Now they're not just watching you, they're watching themselves around you, editing every word, questioning every motive, because suddenly you're not just a person anymore. You feel like access, like a spiritual scanner that catches the things they've been ignoring. And the more they try to understand how you know what you know, the more uncomfortable they get, because there's no logical explanation. You weren't supposed to see that deep, that fast, that clearly, but that's the difference. You weren't reading them to control them. You were revealing what their own spirit has been trying to say for years, and now they can't unhear it. That kind of clarity shakes people, especially when it comes without warning, and especially when it leaves them no more room to hide. Number 5, they laughed when you spoke spiritual truth. Now they're waking up at 3 a.m., haunted by it. They laughed, not just to be funny, but to dismiss you, to downplay the depth of what you said. They rolled their eyes when you mentioned energy, spirit, or divine timing, labeled your truth as too deep or doing too much. They mocked your words like they were just abstract ideas with no real power. But the joke didn't last long, because somewhere in the middle of brushing you off, you dropped a line they can't forget, a sentence, a phrase, a truth so specific it clung to their spirit like a fingerprint. And ever since then, they haven't been able to shake it. They try to carry on like everything's normal, laugh like they used to, keep the same energy of doubt and sarcasm, but deep down they're unraveling, not publicly, no. That would require admitting you were right, but privately, they've been waking up in the middle of the night with that one thing you said echoing in their head. It wasn't even something you tried to make dramatic. You just said it, and their soul caught it before their ego could reject it. And now, it won't let them go. They don't understand how you knew what you knew. You weren't around. You didn't grow up with them. You don't know their full story. But your words hit like someone who walked their entire past, like someone who's been reading their spirit while they were too busy trying to be skeptical. They can't explain it logically, and that's the part that's driving them wild, because they live in a world of facts, plans, and control, and now they're haunted by a truth they didn't give you permission to see. Now they're on Google at 2 a.m. typing in things like spiritual signs or intuition meaning. The same people who mocked you are secretly studying the very things they claim to be above. And every time they replay your words, a new layer of meaning hits them. Not just because you were right, but because they know deep down it wasn't you speaking. It was something greater, using you like a microphone. They laugh to protect themselves. But revelation doesn't need applause. It just needs a heart that can't unfeel the impact. And the longer they run from it, the louder it echoes in the silence they thought would save them. Number 6, they wanted to prove you wrong, but you made their reality glitch. They thought they were going to catch you slipping, maybe expose you as overly spiritual or just good at reading people. They came into the conversation prepared to analyze, test, and mentally dissect everything you said. They weren't listening to understand. They were listening to find flaws. They wanted to prove that your insight wasn't real, that you were just intuitive, observant, or lucky. They had their doubts locked and loaded, but then you spoke, and the atmosphere changed. You said something no one else could have known. Not vague, not generic, specific, personal, like it was plucked straight from a hidden file in their soul. It wasn't a guess. It was too sharp, too precise. It hit a pressure point they didn't even know they had. And right there in that moment, their entire perception cracked. They weren't just dealing with someone who picks up on energy, they were face to face with someone who sees through it. Now they're not just questioning you, they're questioning everything. Because you didn't just rattle their ego, you shook their concept of what's real and what's possible. You made their version of control glitch, you made their certainty collapse. It's like they were living in a mental simulation where everything had to be logical, provable, and tangible. And then you walked in and broke the code without even trying. That's what they're struggling with. Not just that you were right, but that your truth exposed the limits of their reality. They thought you were observing, but now they're wondering if you're receiving, if you're connected to something, someone higher. They feel watched in a way that has nothing to do with your eyes. They feel known in a way that's spiritual, not psychological. And ever since then, nothing has felt the same. Their confidence in their own logic has been shaken. They don't trust their ability to hide like they used to. They're wondering if every lie, every mask, every hidden motive is already in your view, and worse, if you've already responded without them realizing it. They came to challenge you, but now they're spiraling. Because when a chosen one speaks from a place of spiritual alignment, it doesn't just shift conversations. It bends reality. And once it bends, it never quite goes back to what it was before. Number 7, you triggered a spiritual identity crisis they can't unsee. You didn't come to break anyone. You weren't trying to pull the rug from under them or expose their inner chaos. But just by being who you are, grounded, honest, and deeply intuitive, you held up a mirror that showed them something they've been avoiding their entire life. And what they saw wasn't pretty. It wasn't the curated version of themselves they show the world. It wasn't the confident, composed image they've convinced others and themselves they really are. It was raw, unfiltered, and painfully real. You triggered something deeper than guilt. You triggered a spiritual identity crisis, and not because you accused them of anything, but because your presence alone disrupted the lies they were living in. You never even had to call it out directly. They felt it. It was in the way you saw them without judgment, but with clarity. That kind of clarity is rare, and it's threatening to someone who's built their life on illusion. Before they met you, they had their act together, at least on the surface. They knew how to manipulate perception, how to say the right things, how to hide the mess under charm and composure. But then you showed up, and for the first time, they didn't feel in control of how they were being perceived. You didn't fall for the performance. You didn't get distracted by the personality. You went straight to the spirit, and what you saw unsettled them more than they'll ever admit. Now, they can't unsee it. Every time they look in the mirror, they're not just seeing themselves, they're seeing the version you saw. The one with unresolved jealousy, with motives that aren't as pure as they claimed, with shadows they thought they'd hidden well. You didn't shame them, you simply revealed them. And because of that, they're now living in the discomfort of their own truth. It's not that you exposed them to others, you exposed them to themselves. And that's the most brutal type of exposure. You didn't hurt them, you awakened them. And that awakening is wrecking every lie they told to feel safe. They can't go back to the mask, not fully. Because once someone's been seen by someone who carries divine sight, pretending becomes impossible. And healing? Inevitable, even if it starts with a breakdown. Number 8, they thought you were the experiment. Now they feel like the lab rat. They came in thinking they were in control. You were just another person they could analyze, dissect, and maybe even provoke for their own curiosity. They saw you as an experiment, something to monitor. They watched how you reacted to stress, how you carried yourself in conflict, how you responded when disrespected. They weren't trying to learn from you, they were trying to figure you out. They thought if they pressed the right buttons, you'd reveal something they could use against you, something that proved you weren't as deep or discerning as you claimed to be. But nothing went according to their plan, because while they were observing you, they didn't realize they were being spiritually scanned in real time. You didn't flinch. You didn't fold. And you didn't react in the way they hoped. You responded with such inner knowing and calm precision that suddenly they felt like the one under the microscope. Every time they tried to provoke a response, they ended up revealing more of themselves than they intended. Their insecurities slipped out. Their hidden envy leaked through. Their motives, once well disguised, started showing in plain sight. And you saw it all. The more they tried to study you, the more exposed they became. It flipped so fast they didn't even realize it was happening. You didn't need to force anything. Your discernment did all the heavy lifting. Every move they made in secret became clear to you before it even played out. And now they're unsettled. Because in trying to decode you, they accidentally opened themselves up to a level of spiritual vulnerability they've never experienced. Now they're wondering what you know, how much you picked up, whether you've already drawn conclusions about them, and worse, whether heaven has already taken note. Because this wasn't just about you being insightful. This was divine data collection. They weren't just playing with your boundaries. They were being evaluated by something far bigger than you. They started off thinking they had the upper hand, that you were the mystery to solve, but now they're the one losing sleep, questioning what just happened and realizing the test they set up backfired completely. You weren't the lab rat. You were the spiritual scientist, and now they know they've been exposed in ways they didn't even know were possible. Number 9, your calmness wasn't confusion. It was calculated, spirit-led clarity. They thought you didn't get it, that you were slow to catch on, unaware of what was really going on behind the scenes. They mistook your quietness for weakness, your peace for passivity, and your grace for gullibility. They thought they were playing a game of mental chess while you were sitting there confused. But the truth is, while they were plotting moves in the natural, you were receiving instructions in the spiritual. Your calm wasn't confusion, it was divine calculation. You saw through it all, every lie, every manipulation, every shift in tone, every twist in the narrative. But instead of reacting immediately, you watched. You waited. You stayed aligned with the bigger picture. Because wisdom told you, sometimes the loudest way to speak is to let someone finish their sentence. Sometimes the best way to win is to let the enemy hang themselves with the rope they brought for you. That's exactly what happened. You didn't interrupt them. You didn't defend yourself too soon. You didn't argue. You let the story unfold. You let the manipulation breathe just long enough for it to choke itself out. And while they were busy twisting facts and trying to paint you as unaware, your spirit was documenting every detail. You weren't missing a beat. You were just gathering enough evidence to make the whole thing collapse in one silent blow. Now they're confused, because the version of you they created in their mind doesn't match the outcome. They thought you'd break. They thought you'd lash out. They thought you'd play into the trap, but instead you stayed still, stayed wise, and let your silence carry a power their schemes couldn't handle. That's what unnerves them the most, not just that you knew, but that you knew and stayed calm anyway, that you smiled while being betrayed, that you remained peaceful while being lied to, that you walked through their chaos untouched, like someone already standing in the victory they were trying to delay. They don't know how to deal with that, because when a chosen one is quiet, it's not because they're clueless, it's because they've already seen the end of the story, and most times, they're just giving the enemy enough space to reveal everything. Number 10, you intercepted their hidden intentions before they became actions. They never saw it coming because you saw it before it even began. Before they could send that shady message, start that rumor, shift their energy, or launch the fake kindness campaign, you already felt it in your spirit. Not because they told on themselves with words, but because their energy shifted in a way only a spiritually in-tune person would catch. You didn't wait for the attack to hit. You moved early, adjusted your position, pulled back, protected your peace. And by the time they were ready to make their move, they were shocked to find that you had already outmaneuvered it. That's what's freaking them out. You intercepted something that wasn't even said out loud. They hadn't exposed their hand yet, but your spirit picked up the signal like a divine radar. It wasn't guesswork. It wasn't paranoia. It was spiritual interception, pure and accurate. While they were sitting there thinking they were being slick, you were already canceling out the energy of the plan they were still formulating in silence. They're confused. They don't know how you knew. They didn't text anything. They didn't speak it. They didn't even act on it yet. But somehow you were already responding like someone who saw the entire blueprint. You adjusted your tone, you changed your schedule, you distanced yourself. And you did it with such precision that it threw them off completely. Now they're sitting there asking, how did they know? And they're not finding any natural explanation that makes sense because there isn't one. This is what they don't understand about spiritual discernment. It works faster than conversation. It detects the vibration before the action. It scans motives before plans take form. And when you're a chosen one, you don't need to wait for confirmation. Your soul gets alerts that others miss. So when they plan to manipulate you, drain you, or use you, the warning had already gone off in your spirit. And you didn't just receive it, you moved on it. Now they're left confused and frustrated, sitting with a plan that died in their throat. You made a move based on a future they hadn't reached yet. And to them, that looks like magic. But to you, it was just another day of listening to the one who sees everything before it happens. Number 11, their eyes told on them, and you took notes with your spirit. They were so focused on managing their words, they forgot their eyes were having a full-blown confession. They rehearsed what to say, how to say it, even when to laugh. But their energy betrayed them. Their body language cracked. Their tone shifted at the wrong moment, and their eyes, those were the loudest, full of nervousness, flickers of resentment, hidden envy, quiet guilt. They didn't realize you weren't listening for the message. They didn't know you are the message detector. You weren't locked in on what they were saying. You were reading the space between the syllables, The pauses, the glances, the tension they tried to swallow. You caught it all, every contradiction between what they said and what they felt. Every time they tried to smile through gritted teeth, every time their eyes darted just a little too fast when you spoke truth. You noticed the hesitation before the compliment, the over-explanation after a harmless question. You were taking spiritual notes without even lifting a pen. That's why they're nervous around you now. They can't figure out what you know, only that you know something, something real, something about them they didn't offer up willingly. It's unsettling because you never asked invasive questions. You never pressed them to explain themselves. You didn't need to. Their own presence spoke volumes, and you picked up every word without interrupting. What makes this so disturbing for them is that they thought they were in control. They thought if they said the right things, they could sell the illusion. But you weren't buying anything. You were observing the testimony of their spirit. And while their mouth was trying to clear them of all charges, their eyes were confessing under oath. You weren't rude. You weren't confrontational. You just processed what they revealed with quiet accuracy. That's what has them spooked. They're not afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being seen fully, spiritually, without their filters. Because once someone realizes you don't just hear them, you read them, everything changes. Now they're second-guessing how much they showed, wondering how many of their secrets slipped out through glances and posture. And the truth is you caught it all, not to hold it against them, but because your gift can't not notice the truth when it walks into the room wearing a lie. Number 12. You made them realize that hiding from you means hiding from God. They thought they were just dealing with a person, someone they could fool, charm, mislead, or impress. But when they stood in front of you, something deeper happened. You didn't just hear them, you spiritually registered them. You didn't just know facts, you knew truths. And it didn't feel like you were being nosy or intrusive. It felt divine, like something bigger than both of you had revealed it to you. That's what shook them to the core. The exposure wasn't just personal, it was spiritual. What messed them up wasn't just that you picked up on things they thought they'd hidden. It was that your knowing didn't feel invasive, it felt sacred. It felt like heaven whispered to you the things they thought hell had successfully covered. It was the kind of clarity that makes people nervous because it doesn't come with accusation. It comes with quiet, piercing conviction. You didn't shout it. You didn't expose them publicly. You didn't have to. The moment your eyes locked on theirs, they felt seen in a way they couldn't laugh off or escape. And now, every time they're around you, they hear echoes. Every lie they try to tell doesn't land the way it used to. Their rehearsed excuses feel flat in your presence. Their sarcasm turns to dust because they know deep down that you're not just discerning, you're connected. And hiding from you feels dangerously close to trying to hide from God. That's the level of weight your presence carries. You didn't ask for that authority, it was given. And now people are realizing that being fake around you comes with spiritual consequences. Their conscience can't rest, not because you exposed them, but because standing near you awakens a part of them they've tried to silence. That quiet inner voice of accountability gets loud again, and your presence is like a spotlight on everything they hoped would stay in the dark. They came in thinking you were just someone with insight, but they walked away realizing they stood in front of someone heaven trusts with revelation. And now they know, if they're not ready to face the truth, being near you will feel like standing in the middle of Judgment Day with no script, no mask, and nowhere to run. Number 13, they can't unplug from the connection you never asked for. You never chased them, you never begged for their energy, their attention, or their story. You didn't ask to be spiritually linked to them, but once they crossed paths with you, the connection locked in. And unlike most connections that are built through words, time, or shared experiences, this one was forged in something much deeper. Their spirit recognized yours before their mind could even process what was happening. And ever since then, whether they admit it or not, they felt exposed, readable around you. You can feel their energy even when they haven't spoken to you in weeks. You know when their mood shifts. You know when they're pretending. You know when their energy has gone dark, and when they're wrestling with guilt, shame, or hidden motives. It's not something you try to do, it just happens. That's what makes it all the more frustrating for them. They're doing everything they can to act normal, to pull away, to create distance, but your knowing follows them like a signal they can't block. It's not that you're watching them. It's that their spirit keeps broadcasting information to you whether they want it to or not, and they hate how seen that makes them feel. Because this isn't surface-level discernment, it's soul-level connectivity. Even when they're silent, your spirit picks up on the static. Even when they're physically distant, your insight zooms in like it's standing right beside them. They might not understand how, but they feel it. And it's messing with their head. Now they're trying to unplug. They're avoiding eye contact, avoiding conversations, avoiding your presence entirely. But nothing works, because this connection wasn't made by conversation, it was sparked by alignment. You don't need access to their phone, their social media, or their circle to know what they're going through. You can feel the emotional shifts in real time, even when everything looks fine on the outside. That's spiritual reception. And to someone who's hiding, that's terrifying. They feel like you've tapped into something they can't control. And the truth is, they're right. You never asked to tune into their frequency, but once the energy revealed itself to you, your spirit held on to it. Not to manipulate, not to spy, but because heaven trusts you to know without reacting and to see without exploiting. And that's what unnerves them most. They can't lie their way out of a bond they never consented to but now can't shake. Number 14, they wanted proof you were chosen. Now they're begging the universe to unchoose them. They came with pride in their chest and a smirk on their face. They didn't just question your calling, they dared it. Their ego wanted proof. Their arrogance mocked your discernment. They challenged what heaven confirmed over you like it was a debate, like spiritual authority could be measured by their standards. They wanted a sign, and they got one. But it didn't come with fireworks or fanfare. It came through your calm, piercing clarity that dismantled their ego without you even raising your voice. They thought they were testing you, but in reality they were testing God. And heaven doesn't take lightly to arrogance that disrespects the anointing, so the very moment they opened their mouth to question your authenticity, they unknowingly entered a divine setup, not to destroy them, but to humble them. Because when someone challenges a chosen one's purpose, they're not just dealing with a person, they're confronting the source that assigned them. And now, the backlash is hitting. Things are unraveling around them. Their plans are falling flat. The confidence they once had has morphed into confusion. Every time they remember what you said, that one truth you dropped so casually, so accurately, they feel it chasing them. They're waking up at night with heavy thoughts. They're haunted not by what you did, but by what you knew, because you weren't out to hurt them. But your intuition revealed something their pride wasn't ready to face. Now they're scared, not just of you, but of whatever divine force moves through you. They feel watched, but not by you, watched by consequence, watched by truth. They're replaying everything they said and did, wishing they could undo the moment they mocked what they didn't understand. They asked for proof and got a judgment they didn't expect, a spiritual mirror they can't unsee, and it's wrecking them. They don't want smoke anymore. They want distance. They want quiet. They want to backtrack without admitting defeat, because now they know this wasn't about proving you were chosen. It was about showing them that you were never the one on trial in the first place. They brought their challenge to God, and now they're the ones praying not to be seen too deeply by the same truth they once laughed at. They thought they were observing a person. What they didn't realize was they were standing in front of a divine portal, a walking revelation, a mirror designed by God to reflect truth, not illusion. You weren't trying to expose them, you were simply being who you were created to be, and that alone disrupted every false foundation they were standing on. You didn't ask for this gift, you didn't force the connection. But when heaven marks someone as chosen, even the spiritually blind can feel it. That's why they're unsettled, that's why they're running in circles, second-guessing every move, wrestling with truths they thought were buried. Your presence wasn't an accident, it was a divine interruption. And no matter how much they try to dismiss it, the impact can't be undone. They came to test you. But in the process, they got tested. Their masks slipped, their motives surfaced, and the very proof they demanded became the same evidence that now convicts them. You didn't have to prove your anointing. The results spoke louder than your response. They're not just uncomfortable around you, they're uncomfortable around their own reflection when you're in the room. So to every chosen one watching, never shrink your discernment to fit someone else's comfort zone. Let them be rattled. Let them be awakened. Because your clarity wasn't sent to entertain. It was sent to interrupt spiritual blindness. And trust me, even if they never admit it, they felt it. Your knowing isn't ordinary. Your silence isn't empty. Your energy isn't random. It's assignment. And the way you spiritually intercepted, exposed, and flipped every test without breaking a sweat, that's divine strategy. That's what being chosen really looks like. They asked for a sign. You were the sign, and they'll never forget it. If this message hits something deep in your spirit, don't just keep it to yourself. Let it echo. Hit that like button if you felt seen. Drop a comment and let us know which part confirmed what you already knew. Share this video with someone whose spirit is tuned in but might need the reminder. Subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications, because this isn't just content, it's confirmation. And every time you tap in, you're aligning with truth that's been waiting for you. This space is for the chosen, for the spiritually awake, for those who move in silence but walk with fire. You're not alone, and we're just getting started. God bless you.